Welcome on into the Wolverine.com podcast. Clayton Safey here with a special guest, JD Pickell of On3. You know him from the On3 YouTube channel, from the Hard Count podcast, all sorts of stuff over there. The face of the YouTube channel. Can I say that to Andy and Ari? Maybe get a little offended, but since you're right here, you're absolutely the face. We're going to get to JD in just a second. Before we do, like this video. Let's get to 300 likes if you want Michigan to beat Ohio State for the 5th straight year. You will hit that thumbs up button. And same thing, subscribe to the YouTube channel. As always, find all of our content over at thewolverine.com. You can use the promo code UM1 right now for 2 months of access for just $1. That takes you through Big Ten Media Day, fall camp, Michigan, New Mexico, Michigan, Oklahoma, all that for just 50 cents for the next 2 months, 50 cents per month for the next 2 months. So hop in right now over at thewolverine.com. JD, I'll be in Vegas in 2 weeks. It's kind of crazy. Football is coming soon here.
Dude, how about media days for the Big Ten being in Vegas? Like, that in itself is like, I don't know exactly how that was received, but I imagine most people with minimal obligations to a family or to kids or whatever, they're like, sweet, let's do it. Let's go throw some money down on Michigan, win the national championship. We'll go put something down on the blackjack table. Like, let's cover some football, man. We're here. We're all the way here.
Yeah, I've never been to Vegas, so I was somewhat excited, but as it's grown closer and closer, I'm like looking at the weather. It's going to be 110 degrees. I'm looking at how busy I'm going to be. It doesn't really matter what city you're in for these media days, to be completely honest with you, because it's a sprint for us. That's fair. Like you, I mean, we go to Indy. It's like you don't even see daylight really.
Yeah.
Big Ten championship, you get in a day earlier.
Sorry. Yeah, that's true. That's very true. I didn't mean to cut you off there, Clayton. One thing I was going to say is, as someone who lived in Southern California and Las Vegas was a very short drive away, the city itself, obviously, rock and rolling, a lot of things going on. Don't know how much, juice we have in the tank once we finish the workday. But I will say there is never a time where things close in Las Vegas. So if you're hey, I got an hour here before bed, I'm going to go throw something down on the roulette table. If you're feeling that way, I mean, that is available to you, which is a good or a bad thing. I don't know, but it's just, I want to make sure that that's on your radar.
That's fair. That's fair. I'm sure I'll partake. I feel like I can't come back, especially since we have a podcast here. You can't come back with no stories, right? Sometimes you got to do stuff for the content. So
sure.
And that game, but I also wanted to mention, so we're going to get into some Michigan pre-2025 season talk. I'm going to throw some theories, some different ideas at JD, and I want him to respond. He has a much better knowledge than me at maybe the broader context of some of this stuff, Bryce Underwood, when it comes to following more teams. And then I'm going to throw my college football playoff top 4 seeds at him, and I want to see how he reacts to that. So we're going to get to those things. But before we do, Michigan's recruiting like a program. It's been fun to watch.
They are, dude. Swinging a hot bat. It's a hot bat. I mean, Clayton, you probably have the best gauge for this from your time covering Michigan. How different is the vibe, like, internally in Ann Arbor? Because that was kind of, I think, one of the things you and I talked about once Sharon Moore got the job. Everyone's talking about the differences between him and Harbaugh. Hey, similar traits, similar, philosophies on football. However, the one thing you told me is like, hey, Sharon Moore is going to recruit now, right? He's gonna make it a point to try and recruit a higher caliber of player. And then we have the NIL of it all with the Larry Ellison theories and the Dave Portnoy, at the very least, optical involvement or interest in Michigan NIL. And so all those things combined together to where you're like, hey, in the world of have and have-nots in college football, Michigan's on the right side of things, it seems like a lot of the time. So just to flip that on you, like, how different is the vibe in your estimation, man? It seems like it's drastic.
Well, it's fascinating because in November last year, it was kind of a similar vibe. They land Underwood. They start to flip some other guys that, Nate Marshall, nearly a 5-star edge, comes back from Auburn, was committed to Michigan, goes to Auburn, comes back. A few of those receivers they got late. And then they did well, I thought, in the transfer portal in December. And then they were outside of the top 25 in the recruiting rankings entering the month of June. And they go on this rampage. So it's interesting because you had kind of a lull and some Michigan fans were panicking a little bit. I think Michigan as a program was, being a little bit, they were being a little bit cautious and just kind of waiting until the revenue sharing, the House settlement went through so they could implement the plan that they had in place. And by all accounts, they had a really good plan in place if the results speak to what that plan was. So now they're number 9, I believe, last I checked in the team recruiting rankings. They're beating out Ohio State for 5-star edge Carter Meadows. They're beating out Alabama, Georgia for some of these different recruits. So the vibe's good. They had some really good runs under Jim Harbaugh, but they recruited a little bit more in that like 10 to 15 range as opposed to top 10. Last year finished at 6 under Sharon Moore. And I think when you and I talked after Sharon got hired, we also mentioned that they kind of had to do this, right? He's a first-time head coach, and his strength as an assistant coach, among many other strengths, was recruiting. He established himself as an ace recruiter before he was ever the offensive coordinator, offensive line coach. So, you got to play to your strengths. You got to understand that you're probably not going to develop as well as you did under Harbaugh. So you may need a little bit higher of echelon recruiting classes. And I think they're doing that. And that can go a long way. Now you bring in a bunch of talent, you win that way. He gets better and better as a head coach. And you look up and it's 2026, 2027. You got a sophomore, junior Bryce Underwood with a lot of stud talent around him. Things could look pretty good here.
And the architect of it all, too. I know you and I have touched on this a couple different times when we've had a chance to talk, whether it's on the air or off the air. But the architect behind the Michigan roster of general manager Sean McGee, like he's working with different firepower, obviously, with the NIL and the momentum from what last year was and all those things. But like, I don't know how many like casual college football fans understand that's the same dude who was pretty instrumental in putting together the roster that eventually won a national championship. Now, he wasn't on the staff, but like he was a pretty key piece in like getting some of those guys in the boat that eventually hoisted the national title trophy in Houston. So you have a lot of the same, like, I would have to imagine, like, principles when it comes to evaluating and landing these guys. So like you're maybe just shopping at a different aisle of the grocery store, but like you're making the same kind of meal, if that's a fair metaphor to put to it.
You're the king of metaphors. You and Cowherd.
I appreciate that. That's kind. That's very high praise of you. But
the best one is
the way it feels.
The best one is still USC is in and out. They got the great burgers, but the fries, the defense isn't there. It's incredible.
I appreciate that, man. I appreciate that. But I mean, to stick in metaphors, like I know we're probably going to riff on this a little bit, but if you're Michigan and you were winning games last year, winning fights with a pocket knife, like now you got a freaking samurai sword with Bryce Underwood and the roster, all those things. Like they just continue to up the ante, and it felt like Michigan won in a more gritty way previously. And not to say they won't still be gritty, but to up the talent level in ways you can win feels like what you mentioned. Maybe like the next part of the evolution for Michigan is college football and this playoff, and the Big Ten, quite frankly, evolves.
For sure. And I've been describing it, what I think having improved quarterback play will be this season, as a breath of fresh air, because it's just, even in the spring game, some simple throws from Underwood that just out to a tight end in the flat that maybe they didn't even get to that progression last year, or, there was too much pressure. And obviously the offensive line has to hold up for a number of reasons. They just couldn't get to those simple passes and completions. I don't think they're going to have, they had, I was looking at it earlier. I think it was 4 games of under 100 yards passing. I think they won 3 of them last year, which is ridiculous. Maybe they won all 4. I got to look that up. I'll look it up.
Ohio State, USC, and Alabama. So I mean, those are 3 pretty formidable opponents, like talent-wise, that you're able to beat with double-digit passing yards. Like,
how is that
itself is impressive.
I mean, that's why you have to have a lot of confidence in Wink Martindale coming into the season, and that. Okay, you lost Loveland, you lost Kalel Mullings. I think the running backs will be better than they were a year ago. I was playing the EA Sports video game the other day. They don't have like a go-to guy. Last year, I'd be able to throw to Colston Loveland over and over. And that's just a video game. But in real life, they need to establish that as well. But the quarterback may allow for some of those talents of these other guys to come out a little bit. But I wonder, do you think, as we start our Michigan predictions portion of this,
sure,
do you think there will be any games that Michigan has this year where they throw for less than 100 yards?
I want to make sure I say this without giving like just the knee-jerk reaction, because you do try and play devil's advocate a little bit and say,
Sure.
okay, well, true freshman quarterback. You and I talked about you just mentioned the weapons, and you're still kind of wait and see. I just think even from the sheer number of attempts, like I would be shocked if any of these games they threw for less than 100 yards. Like I just like you have to, I think, like make a concerted effort to stay away from throwing the football to throw for less than 100 yards. Like say whatever you want about a Davis Warren and Alex Orgy and like how they're just not Bryce Underwood physically. Like Michigan was making a point to we're going to run the football and set ourselves up to be ahead of the sticks, live in third and manageable. Like we don't want to throw the football. So if we throw for less than 100, so be it. But like I have a very difficult time believing with the horsepower of Bryce Underwood, they'll live in a similar like attempts number. And if they do, that again would shock me, but I don't see that happening.
I agree with that. And I think it was 5.8 yards per completion last year, not yards per attempt. Yards per completion, lowest in program history by over a yard. So even when they did have completions, to your point, there was no juice. They were the only team in the country without a 40-plus yard passing play the entire year.
Gosh.
And again, they still beat some of the best teams in the country. They beat the national champions. So USC, 32 passing yards. Minnesota, 86. That was the other. So 2-0. Ohio State, 62. Alabama, 75. They went 4-0.
That's incredible.
That is insane. So you're going to have some more production. You hope the offensive line holds up. You hope the running backs stay healthy. They can get the run game going. I think if you're a Michigan fan, those are all some prereqs to being a successful offense, helping out that defense a little bit more. And it's amazing to look at it too, JD. The defense finished, I think, top 10 in scoring or total defense off the top of my head. And that was with pretty much no offense either. I want to get into this, and it's talking about what Michigan's record could be in 12 games this year and what is more likely. And I'm going to throw these things at you, and I know you're not prepared for them, and I think it might be.
I love it.
Yeah, okay. I was going to say you may hate it, but I think it's going to be a better product. What is more likely for Michigan this year? 12-0 or 6-6? And you can be honest. Don't pander to the crowd, JD.
Yeah, no. Let's get down to brass tacks here. 12-0 or 6-6. Going 12-0 with a true freshman quarterback, man, that would really shock me. So like if they're going, if those are my two options, like I'll probably lean 6-6. Just because too, like even the Oklahoma game at Oklahoma, Nebraska, I think is going to be more frisky than people realize, which I know Michigan fans are like, here we go again, Groundhog Day, telling us about Nebraska being sneaky. We've heard that now for the last 4 years. I think actually, like I know it's the boy who cried wolf, but I think actually that's going to be true. Like I think that the Big Ten in itself has so little, like at least for who Michigan draws, I don't see like a ton of separation between like the USCs and the Washingtons, and you got to go to Michigan State, which Michigan State shouldn't be a problem for Michigan, but like still it's a rivalry game and it's on the road. Like,
for sure.
Who the heck knows? So I'll to answer your question in a straight fashion, I'm going to say 6-6 is more likely than going 12-0, paired with Ohio State still being one of the most talented teams in college football.
I think it's close, but I agree with you. I think it's a lot easier to go 6-6 in college football. You have an injury here, an injury there. There's less depth on rosters now, so you could kind of implode. I think 6-6 would be kind of viewed here as a bit of a disaster, but they were also they were going to go 6-6 if they didn't beat Ohio State last year and win by 3 points as 19.5-point underdogs. It was very possible they were going 6-6 a year ago with all the talent they had. I think you may have a little more balance on the roster this year. You have a coaching staff coming back for a second season, a new offensive coordinator that seems like he'll provide a boost, but you could see it playing out maybe that way, partly due to injury, partly because of the youth at quarterback, because you did lose 3 top 100 draft picks and some other talent, that you had 4 actually top 100 draft picks, and 3 of them in the first round. Josiah Stewart came in, I think, 92. So, I do think that I would lean 6-6. Now, the next one is 11-1 or 7-5. Which one is more likely?
I still think we're in the territory of you need a lot to go right in my mind to go 11-1. Just because it's so volatile. Like everything we said about 6-6 versus 12-0, I think to me still holds to where
Yep.
the toughest talent test is obvious. It's Ohio State, but to beat Ohio State, to beat Washington, to beat USC, to beat like there's landmines all over the place to where I don't feel good enough about my question marks with Michigan to just have it be a total check box. I'm gonna lean 7-5 here, Clayton. I'll say 7-5 more likely than 11-1. For the kind of the same discussion points you just made of there's so many variables that we're still wait and see about. They could pop and it would happen and be awesome. And I don't think anybody listening to this podcast would be disappointed if Bryce Underwood was the man from day one and they, won 11 ball games. But 7-5 is more likely to me.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I was torn on this one too. I may lean 11-1 because I don't respect this schedule as much as maybe a lot of other people do. I do think Nebraska could be pretty good. I think Oklahoma could be pretty good. I think there's so much riding on the Oklahoma game. If you get past that, then you have a little bit of a cushion and not necessarily to go 11-1. To me, the goal this year is to go 10-2. We'll get to that in a second.
Yeah.
But because then that gets you in to the college football playoff. But you have a buffer to work with if you beat Oklahoma. You have Nebraska. Going to USC is challenging because Big Ten teams went 6-27 traveling across multiple time zones last year. And Penn State almost went out there and lost in Penn State, but I don't necessarily think USC is going to be a great team. Washington's boomer bust to me. They're kind of my surprise team in the Big Ten, but that game's at home. I think you handle Michigan State. I love the Purdue, Northwestern, Maryland stretch leading into Ohio State. I think sets up. So I think things could go their way, but back to the point that we made about 7-5 and 6-6, there's a lot more downside. Like things could go a lot worse than they could go incredibly well because you can only go, you can only have so good of a record, but you could blow up as well. So the math would say probably take 7-5, but I'm going to lean 11-1 to be a little optimistic.
I love it. I mean, I don't know if we're going this direction of the 8-4 versus 10-2.
That is.
I don't want to. Okay, I don't. Okay, I will bite my tongue then.
Well, go ahead. I mean, 10-2 or 8-4, just take it however you want to.
I mean, I think I'm sitting with this one, and I'm probably saying the same thing that you have communicated to your audience here, but like I'm just looking at that first stretch up to USC. Like just split Oklahoma and Nebraska. Like whatever you think of John Mateer, whatever you think of Dylan Raiola, I think Michigan candidly beats Nebraska. We did a record prediction for Nebraska today, and I have them losing to Michigan. So assuming that's the case, assuming you at least get one of those two, maybe you get both, whatever, you roll into the game against USC, and if you beat USC, you're 5-1, staring down the barrel of Washington, who you play at home. Obviously, Ohio State, you play at the crib, and I don't think Michigan fans are feeling nervous about that one. Maybe nervous is the wrong word. I don't think they're intimidated about that one. Like,
sure,
if you get to the month of November and you have 1 to 2 losses, if I'm a Michigan fan, I'm like, okay, we're good. Like, just get us to Ann Arbor, get Ohio State in the building, lock the gate, 9 wins, get our 10th playoff. Like, so to answer your question, I would lean closer to 10-2 than 8-4 because I think if you're 8-4, I think you've dropped Oklahoma and Nebraska, and I don't think that's going to happen from a momentum standpoint.
I like that. No, you're right. You're right. I think it's a good point because if you can weather that, then you are thinking, okay, get us to Ohio State at the end of the season. And that, if you have 9 wins at that point, then you're going for 10. I think they could easily have 9 going into that game. I could think they could have 10 potentially going into that game. Yeah. I lean 10-2. I picked Michigan 10-2. I actually said that 10-2 and 8-4 are the 2 most likely scenarios. So and that sounds weird, but I have this theory, and it may be going to the wayside a little bit in college football because we're seeing rosters change. We're seeing more teams in the mix. But entering the 2021 season, everyone had Michigan 7-5 or 8-4. They were coming off the 2020 year, and everyone's saying, well, you'd probably split, Wisconsin at Penn State, that sort of thing. Maybe they go 8-4, 9-3, 7-5 if you're really pessimistic. And then it turns out they just won all those games because they were a little bit better than those teams. And that's kind of how it works in college football. Then they beat Ohio State. So then they went 11-1, that you had the one loss to Michigan State. But my theory is, like, if you can beat Oklahoma, you're probably good enough to beat Nebraska, which means you're probably good enough to go to USC. I think it's changing. My theory is going to be put to the test in this new era because it's going to be closer to the NFL than ever before. And one injury here could change how a team looks throughout the course of a season. But I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? I'm a theory guy.
No, I mean, that's what we're here for. I mean, in the month of July, dude, I'm here for all the theories and then some. But I do think, like, momentum, even though it wasn't really a massive factor, it felt like for Michigan last year. I guess the end of the year, you could say it was. But, like,
right,
Bryce Underwood getting something under his belt in that first month and a half of the season, like the USC game to me really is the hinge point to where this whole thing can get rolling. If you can be a 1 or 2 loss team heading into November, I don't think they're dropping a game to, Northwestern or to anybody they shouldn't lose a game to. So yeah, it's one of those things too. When you look at the way they finish the year, it's going to be a nice. There's a lot of good runways. It feels like for Michigan, like the runway in November, the runway after the Washington. Like I like the way it sets up. I really do. So if Bryce Underwood can get comfortable and have some, confidence for the passing game and all those things, we know the vintage Michigan game is going to be there. We know the ground game, the defense, all those things. It's just a matter. I think you probably said this ad nauseum on this platform. Like, it's about the Bryce Underwood horsepower and when and if that light bulb comes on. And is it, week 2 at Oklahoma, or is it, in the bowl game? Like, we don't know.
Right. Totally. You mentioned you picked Michigan to beat Nebraska in your Nebraska season prediction. Do you have like a big spreadsheet? Because you can't overlap, right? Then when you're doing Michigan, you have to pick. Is that challenging for you having to do all these videos?
That's a good question. Not so. It has been in the past for sure. I don't think it is so much now because we can go back and check. So to answer your question, no spreadsheet, but especially for teams like Michigan, who, like, candidly, I don't have Michigan going 7-5, so I'm like, okay, there's less to sort out there. It gets a little more sticky when you go into like the ACC. You're like, what do we have Wake Forest at? What was North Carolina? You know what I mean? Like, then you're maybe in the weeds a little bit more, but no, not so much for the Michigans of the world.
No, that makes sense. I feel like you will get called out though if you pick Michigan to
100%.
lose to Nebraska
100%.
or like flip flop the other way. But I like that, and everyone go check out JD's videos on. I mean, no one previews the college football season better, like daily, than JD Pickell.
I appreciate that.
Let's talk about Bryce. I want to compare him. Someone on our message board over at the Wolverine.com listed some recent freshman starting quarterbacks at different schools. I believe this goes back to 2013. And I want you to tell me, and I don't remember there's one guy on here didn't know really existed. And I don't remember and probably didn't watch Jared Goff at Cal, although now I'm a huge Jared Goff fan.
Sure.
So, but doesn't matter. Like you could have forgotten one of those two, or you didn't pay attention to Brad Kaya at Miami. I don't even know if I'm saying that right. That's the guy.
Brad, California guy. Yeah, Brad Kaya.
But let me list these guys off, and I want you to tell me what you think is possible, or however you want to take it. What would mean Michigan is a playoff team this year? I think we know for sure they're a playoff team if he's Trevor Lawrence at Clemson in 2018.
Sure. Yeah, definitely.
He's on the list. Jake Fromm at Georgia, ton around him there. And they went 13-2. Bo Nix at Auburn, like a roller coaster ride.
All
I don't think you necessarily want that, but the stats were actually better than I remember watching him. Josh Rosen at UCLA threw for over 3,600 yards, 23 touchdowns. They went 8-5 that year. Jaden Daniels at Arizona State, a very raw Jaden Daniels before he was the Heisman winner, well before. Baker Mayfield at Texas Tech.
Ooh, what a poll.
Yeah,
he didn't even start the whole year, right? He got in like what? He got hurt. I don't think he played the whole year, did he? I don't know if you have this up or not. I don't
I'm not.
remember him not playing the whole year. I think that was a big thing. But
Oh,
sorry, I
okay.
cut you off. I apologize.
No, you're good. I'm not sure. I guess he threw for 2,300 yards, 12 touchdowns, 9 picks. The 12 and 9 makes me think maybe he didn't. At Texas
Sure.
Tech, throwing for 2,300 yards, that's not a full year.
Yeah, I mean that's what 3 weeks. 3 weeks
Right.
on that Cliff Kingsbury offense. I mean,
And that puts you near the top 10 in Michigan history in passing for a single season, but that's beside the point. Sam Howell at North Carolina, he was uber productive, 3,600 yards, 38 touchdowns, 7 picks. I think then he was that a true freshman year. And then a year or two later, he was the projected number 1 overall pick coming into the season. Then he ends up 5th round. But
yeah.
that's an interesting one. I believe that was when they had Phil Longo and they were in air raid, so the stats a little inflated. Christian Hackenberg, 2013, almost threw for 3,000 yards, 20 touchdowns, 10 picks. They went 7-5. Brad Kaya at Miami put up some really good numbers, nearly 3,200 yards, 26 touchdowns, 12 picks. They go 6-7. They made a bowl. And then Jared Goff, 1-11 season for them, but threw for 3,508 yards, 18 touchdowns, 10 picks. I don't really know what my question is, but just your thoughts on like what some of these possibilities are.
No, I love it.
Underwood's more highly touted than a lot of these guys coming in. The comparison is kind of Trevor Lawrence in terms of number 1 overall recruit, but I'm not predicting he has anywhere near that type of production.
Yeah, I know. I'm glad we're talking about this because we'll obviously, tinker with different ideas for what we want to talk about in the show. And one of the things that we almost did a segment on was around Bryce Underwood's production relative to like previous Michigan quarterbacks. And the number that I settle on for like what would make me say, no doubt Michigan's a college football playoff team, if Bryce Underwood can account for 30 total touchdowns. Like that's a lot. So that's what, call it 5 rushing, 25 passing. Like 25 passing touchdowns, I think would be tied for, if not nearly the most since Harbaugh was there. Like I go back to Shea Patterson being the guy who kind of for the most touchdowns as a quarterback, I think, even more than JJ McCarthy. But if you can tell me Bryce Underwood's going to account for 30 touchdowns, however he gets it done, I think that number to me says, okay, that probably means the Michigan offense was humming at a decent rate. Like probably were scoring a fair amount of points if your quarterback's got 30 touchdowns. Who knows what else that means for the other, backs in the running back room and what the weapons did. So I'm being long-winded to say that would give me confidence that Michigan's a college football playoff team.
I love that. And I don't think I can disagree with that because that means he played the whole year. He was good enough to play the whole year. He was healthy enough to play the whole year, and he was really productive. I think J.J. McCarthy had 25. Now I'm pulling up J.J.'s stats here. He had – I'm looking at his NFL stats, of which there are none.
No, it's good. He threw like, 22 or something
22
like that?
in both of those 2 years as a starter. So now he had a better running game than they're probably going to – like that was as good as it gets when you look at 22 Corum, 23 Corum and Edwards duo. It had to, he had some rushing touchdowns himself, 5 of them in 2022. So he didn't account for 30. So, but there's going to be more on Underwood's plate, maybe less around him. No defense is going to be as good as the 23 Michigan defense. So if he gets to 30, for sure, I think they're in the playoff. If he, unless it's like some year where he goes off and he's the only thing they got going for him, but I don't think that's going to be the case. If he gets to 28, I feel pretty good. He gets to 27, I feel pretty good.
Legit. And too, we're talking about JJ McCarthy's numbers. Like he threw 3 against Alabama in the Rose Bowl. So like he finished the regular season with I forget what he did in the game in the Big Ten title game, but in the teens, during the regular season. So if we're talking about Bryce Underwood accounting for assuming like north of 20 passing touchdowns and ends up getting to 30 with what he does on the ground, I think that might be one thing that's getting maybe overlooked by like just the average college football fan. I think they're going to run him a somewhat decent amount situationally. Like, with how good of an athlete he is. And if you're trying to get him comfortable, like, it's just 225, 6'3", doing backflips. Like Yeah, we'll let him. We'll call his number a few times on 3rd and 2, or 4th and goal. We'll let 19 carry it with an extra blocker. Like, I think that's going to be a massive part of the game that could factor in. This is a take I stole from our producer Cade Smith. His prediction is that Bryce Underwood is second on the team in rushing yards, so behind a Haynes or a Marshall. He thinks he's the second leading rusher. And I'm like, that's a theory, if nothing else, that I think is intriguing, to say the least.
That would surprise me because sack yardage and everything else. But
yeah,
he's a great runner. You watching him in high school, and I think On3 even posted a video of some of his high school highlights the other day. We collabed on it on our Instagram, and a lot of them are running, and they're fantastic plays. I know level of competition, high school, they played pretty high level in terms of Michigan high school football here. And he's by far the best athlete on the field in pretty much every area. It's not just the big arm. It's not just the accuracy, the way he stands in the pocket and all that. It is the running too. So
yeah.
I've been kind of hammering that home as well, that the rushing, aspect of this is going to be a big deal in terms of what he brings to the table. Let's move on from Bryce, but I think that was a decent exercise. It's fun to look back at some of these freshmen. Now, if you go to Michigan freshman quarterbacks, the last one to start was Tate Forcier, who had a hell of a September. He won the September Heisman, but it didn't.
Yeah,
quite
another
pan out
California
the
guy.
rest of the way.
Another California guy, Tate Forcier.
That's right.
I keep cutting you off. I'm sorry, Clayton. But yeah.
No, please cut me off all you want. Chad Henne before that, John Navarre, I believe, as well. So you have to go back. Those are really the only three this century that did it. And so it's hard to compare, right? I guess is my point, that there isn't much to go off of. And they haven't landed somebody this highly touted since Drew Henson. And, he was splitting time with a pretty famous quarterback. So I want to move on to this. Dominic Zavada, Michigan's kicker, is the only first-team preseason All-American on Walter Camp for the Wolverines this year. Do you think there is somebody who joins him in that echelon? Does Michigan have somebody out there that can join him? And I'll give my thoughts as well. I'll give mine maybe what you think, because, you cover a lot of teams. I just cover one. I think they have some candidates for this in the form of Rod Moore if he's healthy. I'm not sure what his status is going to be. I think one of the running backs, it's probably a little lofty to say first-team All-American, but I could see something like, third-team All-American. It's really hard at the running back spot. I think there are two spots for running backs on these lists, but even in the Big Ten, it's a pretty loaded year at running back with the Penn State guys and Oregon and some other teams. But in terms of high-level talent, you have them. You have some defensive linemen. Rayshon Benny, I think, could really break out. Derek Moore, I think, could really break out. So it's kind of odd to see just one Michigan player, and it's the kicker. But it kind of shows you, as I mentioned earlier, it's more of a balanced roster, but you don't have the star power. Last year had a lot of star power, but didn't maybe have the depth and, all the spots filled out. So it's – and maybe I won't even ask you to name them because it's a tough thing.
No, I love it.
Do you think some guys will be in that echelon, and do you think Michigan needs some of those guys to be if they're going to make the playoff? I guess what this show has turned into is like a path to the playoff. But
I love it. No, as people are probably hearing on their podcast platforms, like some clicking away, I was searching just different things with Michigan on their roster, and what you said was more specific to the overall take I would have. It feels like Michigan defensively always has somebody kind of pop up, and being a first-team All-American, you'd have to pop up in a pretty big way. But it would be, I think, ill-advised for the average college football fan to bet against there being anybody from Michigan having an All-American caliber season on the defensive side. Just Wink Martindale, the way he dials it up, some of the guys that have probably been lurking on the depth chart for a while, like Rayshon Benny, I know we've mentioned before. I don't know if he's the guy that you would pick to be in that discussion or not, but I guess candidly talking to, the folks like y'all over at the Wolverine, it just continues to come up. The frequency of names, especially during the spring, seems to be something that is worth taking into the fall. You keep talking about Rayshon Benny during spring practice. It's like, okay, well, I could see him being a guy that pops, come week 2 when they go to Oklahoma. So again, a roundabout way to say I think there's probably some suspects on the defense that maybe nationally aren't known right now, but wouldn't be surprising at all if they did pop up. Outside of that, I'm thinking of just other ways to where I could see this happening. Is Fred Moore going to return kicks? Because if he is, it just takes what, one or two to run back, and you're already in that discussion.
Okay, that's you've opened up a loophole here. Yeah, the
return. Is that something
really,
we could flirt with? Maybe we're talking about specialists.
It's not really a loophole though. Yeah, that is a spot on there. I don't know that Fred Moore is going to return kicks, but I think they could have. I don't know. It's tough to say. I don't know that he's in that mix, but somebody could be a guy that breaks a couple. I was going to say Jordan Marshall, but I don't think they're going to use him back there like they did last year when he was healthy, because he's potentially your starting running back, and they didn't like to do it. Like Kalel Mullings was their best kick returner, but he was winded every time they took the field for offense, and he became that important. So, but you're right. It could be, it could be Samaj Morgan as a punt returner. He's been pretty good there. Didn't have a great year last season, but and I should have framed it. First team is a little lofty. Second or third team. And I think Rayshon Benny could fall in the second or third team line. He only backed up Mozzie Smith, Chris Jenkins, Mason Graham, and Kenneth Grant his entire career. And now it's his show. I think you're going to see him average 35 plus snaps a game. And he already has flashed. You go back years and there were big plays. Forced fumble against Penn State a couple years ago. Big time pressures at Ohio State in 2022. That was a long time ago. And he's been producing. So he's ready to go. Like, I think part of him was a little salty that he wasn't in the NFL this year. And we've seen that from some Michigan guys, especially on the defensive line over the years, where they feel like they should, maybe have, or they just feel like it was somewhat unfortunate that they had to sit behind these other talented guys. And then they have their own year. Mike Morris a couple years ago was waiting behind Hutchinson and Ojabo, and then he was the Big Ten defensive lineman of the year the next season. So I think Benny's right in line with all those guys. And Mozzie Smith said it a couple years ago. Our John Borton, the legendary John Borton here at the Wolverine, asked him, like, well, you lost all these guys on the D line, how are you guys going to replace them? And he looked at him, and Mozzie Smith's kind of an intimidating guy. And he's like, we always reload here on the D line. That's what we do. Like, we're not worried at all. Like, you guys can say whatever you want out there, but we're going to be fine. And that defensive line was fine. They go back to the playoffs. So now I'm being long-winded talking about Rayshon Benny, but Derek Moore, I think, in that boat as well. So to your point, the defense is where you have to look when it comes to where these high-end players could be, and that excites you for what the defense could be. Worth mentioning, Ernest Hausman, Jayshon Barham, that could be a heck of a linebacker duo as well.
And one more name, there's got to be a couple All-American teams out there that got a fullback, right? Like Max Bredesen, knocking some skulls. You got to think that he would be in that short list of people to watch to be on an All-American team for those that are considering the fullback position. I know they've kind of become extinct in most circles, but like for those that consider the fullback still a viable All-American spot, Max Bredesen has to be in that mix, in my humble opinion.
I can't tell you how excited I am that you just said that, because I'm always like, we bring up Max Bredesen probably once a pod, and for good reason. But like, we build ourselves as kind of the official podcast of Max Bredesen. He's been on before. He was as awesome as you would expect on the show, and it was an oversight by me. He could, if that's a position on there, he could easily make it. There's no question in my mind. I'm writing an article right now that will come out at some point this week, what EA Sports got right and got wrong about Michigan. And he's not the toughest player on their team, JD. It's ridiculous.
Who was it? I didn't even catch who it was.
Well, I don't
want to spotlight him, I guess, if it's not the toughest guy, but like, yeah, he should be top tier for sure.
100%. I actually don't remember. I was jotting down notes as I was going through the roster, and I'll look more into it and write that in the article. But the note I have is ridiculous. Max Bredesen, not toughest. So that's awesome. That's what I'm working on right now. I don't know who it is. As you said, not to say they're not a tough guy, but that's ridiculous. Awesome. It's ridiculous.
That's awesome. Yeah, oversight by EA, man. Oversight.
Absolutely. Maybe they'll fix it. Okay. I want to give you my playoff, and I want you to judge what it is. I'm infringing on your territory making national picks, but
no.
we have to do this for our magazine. If you haven't gotten it yet, the WolverineOnDemand.com. JD, I believe they're in the office down there. Can you confirm that? The Michigan football preview.
I have seen at least one solid copy, and it's a good looking mag. So if you're in the market and you want to be dialed into Michigan football, like I would purchase one. All I'm saying, I'm going to have my hands on one here soon. I can't wait, but I would purchase one.
Okay, I'm pretty sure there's a box down there, so you got to find. I don't know who's holding them back, who's stealing all of them, but
they're gatekeeping, dude. You know, they just want to keep them for themselves and hoard all the intel. But it's just we'll find a way.
Exactly, but no, get your hands on one. We had to do this, and I picked. We used to pick our top 4 that just the 4-team field. Now we just do the top 4 because 12's too hard, I guess. Like you're predicting a bunch of games, and we're just Michigan writers. So here's my top 4, and this is in alphabetical order. So I don't know what the order is. I don't remember what I had them at, but Clemson, LSU, Notre Dame, and Penn State. And that last spot could be Ohio State. I have Penn State beating them in the Big Ten championship, but as we get closer to the season and I remember who Penn State's coach is, I start to question that a little bit. And maybe it's fool's gold that, they were top 4 last year because they made the semis, but their draw was, really probably not warranted. I know they changed the seating this year. So a lot of this had to do with schedule when it comes to Clemson, Notre Dame. I think Penn State splits Ohio State and Oregon. I have them in the championship game, like I said. Then I have them winning that game, so that puts them in the top 4. LSU, to me, I know I could get dogged for that, but Garrett Nussmeier. Like, I know what I'm getting. I think you're a Nussmeier guy too. Like, I don't think he's the best quarterback in the world, but I at least know what I'm getting, and he could take a big step as a second-year starter because those guys do take a pretty big leap. I know, I mean, look at it throughout history. Second-year starter and a guy who, looked pretty good at points last year, I think could get them there, and I like their schedule. A lot of this has to do with schedule.
Especially, I mean, at LSU, second-year starters. Like,
true.
Joe Burrow, Jaden Daniels. And I know it's different staffs and different coordinators and whatever, but, like, I'm just saying this. If it comes down to logo, if it comes down to the uniform and being in Death Valley, like it's not insane to say. So just to make sure I have this correct, the top 4 seeds that you are going through there in alphabetical order is for those that are in a conference champions. Is that fair to say? So like LSU wins the SEC, Clemson wins the ACC, the Big 12 doesn't have a team that makes the top 4 seeds, and then Penn State wins the Big 10. Is that how I'm reading this?
That is correct.
Okay.
I'm also looking at LSU's schedule right now. It's tougher than I thought, but they're going to have to win the SEC there because they play Clemson. There it is. That a lot of tough road games, but I don't know what I was thinking.
Ooh, I love it though. I mean, but you look at this just to kind of back you up here because I love LSU. I think as much as anyone else in college football right now. Is there a game that we can point to and say, you know what, like the other team has a better quarterback? Like, I know DJ Lagway is really good, and I think there's a ton of potential for him. But in terms of, like, have I seen you do it for the entirety of a season? Like, I would take Garrett Nussmeier over every quarterback on this list except for the conversation starts with Lenora Sellers. I actually think Lenora Sellers is going to be the best quarterback in the SEC, but that's a projection. Like, right now, Garrett Nussmeier, what he's proven, he is the best quarterback. He's the most sure thing, going back to what you said. He's the most sure thing at quarterback in the SEC. I think it's the most sure thing at quarterback in college football, quite frankly. So I love the LSU pick if the feedback portion starts at this point. Like, I love the LSU pick 110%.
The feedback portion does start. I appreciate that.
Sensational. I love the LSU pick. I also love the Clemson pick. Like, I think Clemson is the safest thing in college football right now. The quarterback going in year 3. It's Dabo Swinney pedigree, so like you have some confidence there, or should have confidence there if you're a Clemson fan right now or a college football consumer. The thing that I love so much about Clemson, the reason why I say they're the safest, number 1 returning production, which is awesome, But with that returning production, there's a veteran presence there to where like, I don't think Clemson's going to have like this massive toe stubbing moment. I think they lose the first game to LSU, full transparency. But outside of that, like, yeah, they can. 100. I mean, they went 9-3 last year and made the playoff. But like, I think like the game against Louisville is a Friday night game. It's on the road. We all know weird things happen on weekdays in college football. But like, I don't think like Clemson's going to stub their toe against Louisville because they got a bunch of adults on that football team, and like adults have a certain maturity about themselves, and they bring their same level of intensity and detail to the table. And like that's what this team is. Like I know there's some young guys at receiver, and there's transfers you're working in. All three of them that Clemson took a whopping 3 transfers via the portal. With shout out Dabo for that. But I don't see a spot where Clemson's going to have this like stumbling block moment. And no Miami on the schedule. I don't think they'll stumble. I think they go 11-1, and I think they win the ACC. And I think that they're a team that's right there with LSU as a top 4 seed. So I love that. I will personally say, in terms of pushback, I like Notre Dame as a playoff team. I have a hard time seeing them as a top 4 seed with their schedule paired with no conference title. Like I think that 11-1 Notre Dame, I'd be curious how the committee would treat them. If they're up against, call it a 10-2, I mean, let's just, for the sake of this conversation, say it's a Big 12 champ. Like, I don't know how that stacks up. And then Penn State, man, like I like Penn State a lot. I'm still a little bit nervous about Drew Aller. You know what I'm saying? I think he's probably the most sure thing in the Big Ten. I think a lot of the blame has been put on the receiving core, which is 110% fair. The chops are there with Drew Aller, but I do worry about like the consistency a little bit. You know what I'm saying? Like there's been some spots where I'd love the quarterback to make the difference regardless of what we don't have at receiver. And I haven't seen him be able to do that in the form of his team getting a win. Like the Oregon game, he was awesome for sure. Like he made a lot of great throws, kept them in it. But like I'm waiting for Drew Aller to do what, not to use NFL comparisons here because I know it's a college football outfit, but like Tom Brady, and he's the greatest of all time, and that's a lofty comparison. But like Tom Brady, he's out there with me at receiver every other week. It felt like during his career, and like didn't matter. Elevates the team, finds a way to win. Yeah. I'm waiting for the finds a way to win moment from Drew Aller. In addition to, I'm still curious what that receiving core is going to be, and Tyler Warren's not coming back through those doors anytime soon. So I like Penn State as a playoff team. I need to see it before I believe Penn State's going to be like a Big Ten championship team.
I think all those points are fair. I'm not confident in these, but
that's what July is for, baby. Yeah.
I had to pick somebody. Yeah, I don't. Is it going to be CJ Carr? I don't know that I really trust him at this point either.
Sure.
And as you mentioned, they are not going to get the benefit of the doubt without a. They loved probably that last year's format in terms of the seeding, because they could always get to 5, 6, 7 maybe. I think they're in the 8, 9 or 7, 10 game last year, but ideally you don't lose to Northern Illinois. You're the 5. And that's the best spot to be in that old format. But they changed it now. So the 5 is still an okay spot to be in, but it's not what it was. So it's interesting. It's very interesting. There are a lot of teams, which makes this fun, that are in the mix to make the playoff. Last thing, and I saw this and I haven't watched the full video yet. You have some crazy hypotheticals out there, college football hypotheticals, that how the season could play out. Sure. What's the craziest hypothetical that could happen this year nationally or in the Big Ten? Anything?
Yeah. The craziest hypothetical. There's a couple of them. I mean, playoff matchups wise, I'm just thinking of a world where we get Ohio State, Michigan twice. Like, to keep it on brand here, I'm thinking of a world where just to cater to the Michigan audience here, and this is not like, I'm not predicting this, I guess is my point, but I think this hypothetical is so wild and also so plausible. Like, imagine Ohio State, same situation as last year, rolls into Ann Arbor, Michigan gets win number 10, beats Ohio State. Ohio State goes 10-2, whatever, and we run it back, but it's in Columbus. Like, can you imagine the amount of pressure on Ryan Day in that spot. Like in that spot, all the good vibes from the national title the year before are gone. If you lose 2 games in a row to Michigan in the same season, or 2 games, or let's be generous and say it's Ohio State wins the Big Ten. I guess in that situation, they're probably not playing Michigan in a home and home situation or a home field situation. But the bottom line, if you lose to Michigan in the playoff, playing for the second time, that I think would be a hypothetical that, like, I don't know what I would do in that regard, because I've been the guy on the front line saying, yeah, the Michigan thing is unsavory and sucks if you're an Ohio State fan, but like Ryan Day is a really freaking good coach. Like Ryan Day, statistically speaking, doesn't really lose games he's not supposed to lose outside of that one Purdue game where Rondell Moore just went road to glory mode. Like, he's a really freaking good coach, but if you lose to Michigan twice, it would just be the most uncomfortable of uncomfortable worlds to be in Columbus, because you just won the national title, but you just lost. Would that be 6 in a row to Michigan? Like it'd be crazy. That is a wild hypothetical that I don't know what we would do with that.
Yeah, violence is out of the question. Well, not really, I guess, after last year, but
I think everything's on the table, unfortunately.
Yeah, that would be absurd. Especially if the second game was in Columbus. If it was 2 in Ann Arbor, people would be like, well, same thing's going to happen again. I would think, gosh, if they lose that, though, and then win, I think you're kind of fine. But if he loses 2 to Michigan next year, then there's actually something. Like, I know there already is a problem here where they can't beat Michigan. The last year was kind of the proof of that. But if he loses 2, damn, would that be fun. As an unbiased journalist, JD, but
yeah,
that'd be hilarious. I mean, I know what you would do. You'd make great content out of it because it'd be a hilarious scenario. So
it'd be but I mean, to be fair, to flip it on the other side, and this is not going to be popular, but like, let's say that he beats Michigan twice. Like, let's say Michigan's got 10 wins, they roll into Columbus, lose on a field goal, whatever, play in the college football playoff, and they lose to Ohio State a second time. At that point, like, all the good vibes of the last few years for Michigan are gone too. So just like to play both sides of this thing, if either team wins 2 next year in that rivalry, I don't know if the college football world would be able to handle that. Like, I think our server would crash.
And they could play 3. It'd be very unlikely. I don't think it could be 3 in a row, because if you win 2, you're definitely in the top 4. So you'd have a bye, but you could play 3 out of 4 games against each other. It's funny. That was always the worry when they were in different divisions, when it was the legends and leaders. People are like, well, they're going to play 2 weeks in a row. And then it didn't work out. And then last year, everyone's like, they could play 3 years in a row, and it didn't happen. At some point, though, as we go down this road of expanding college football and, there's no divisions in the Big Ten anymore and all this, they are going to play multiple times in a year. Like, I know it's a crazy hypothetical now because we haven't seen it across really 3 eras now. Of the playoff and of the Big Ten with divisions, but it will happen at some point. And I don't know that I like it, but it's going to happen, and it will be somewhat fun and different in a certain way.
I'm curious to hear your take on that, because I think I fall more on that sentiment that you just mentioned. I think that the game happening in Columbus, in Ann Arbor, one time a year, there's something magical about that. Having been to the game one time, like, there's something about that is just unique to college football. You cannot get it anywhere else, can't recreate it, and playing it one time is special. I also feel like, though, in the nature of how much I don't like where college football is, and this is getting to a larger conversation, but like how I don't love playoff expansion, just full transparency. I don't love the realignment of it all. But if we got Michigan, Ohio State in a playoff game, and we didn't know we were going to get in the playoff game, the average sports fan that would be exposed to Ohio State, Michigan, even if it is a touch watered down because it's at a neutral site or it's a playoff game and it's not in the regular season, I still think there's a part of that could be good for getting people introduced to why college football is awesome. It's not to say, it's kind of like a little gateway drug. You know what I'm saying? Like, just a little something to get you hooked, get you dialed in, and then before you know it, you're watching week 0, Kansas State, Iowa State, like it's, the greatest thing you've ever seen.
You're right. And I think that if you're a Michigan or Ohio State fan, how much you like this if they were to rematch would have everything to do with which game you won, how many of those 2 games you won. If you get swept, you'd be like, this is so stupid,
This
whatever.
is dumb.
If you won the first and lost the second and your season was over on December 15th, you'd be like, this is so dumb. I would have rather lost to anybody else. Now we don't even feel, as you mentioned, the good vibes of beating them 2 weeks earlier. So much of the feelings on this are going to be that. But that's almost my point in not liking it, though, is that it does decrease the importance of the initial one. No one will ever be able to create, again, ever, what was on the line in that 2023 Michigan-Ohio State game. Literally everything was on the line. Ohio State, their season was essentially over. Their next game was the Cotton Bowl. All their players opted out. Michigan goes on, and that was the springboard to them winning the national championship. And it came down to a game-sealing interception on a potential game-winning drive at the end. So, you add in the off-the-field stuff. Jim Harbaugh wasn't on the sideline. There were rumors that Ohio State, and still are, that could have been behind part of or some of all these allegations. So you can't recreate stuff like that. It's what we've lost in college football. No game will ever mean as much as that ever meant, but more games now mean more than they did before, if that makes sense. So it's a trade-off.
Yeah. No, I think you're 100% right. And that's the tricky thing, I think, for guys like us, Clayton, that love everything about what has made college football great, the fabric that has built this sport, that is what you and I grew up on, that started with the AP poll. I kind of got more dialed in during the BCS era, just to be 100% honest with this audience. That was like kind of when I came online as a college football fan. But like, how do we cherish that and enjoy that, but also at the same time be like, this is still a great sport. I don't like the changes. I don't love this, but like, I do still like have to in some respects, obviously, because we work in it, but also like as a college football fan, like I want to embrace whatever is around the bend to some extent. You know what I mean? I want to move forward and be excited about this next chapter in what I think is still the greatest sport on the face of the planet. It's a weird spot to be in, dude. It really is.
It is. It's always been a flawed sport, though. In terms of like, there's debate over. In 1973, there was athletic directors vote between Michigan and Ohio State who goes to the Rose Bowl. In the AP poll era, we have split national title. Like, there's always been controversy and things that people hated about it. It's getting worse and worse with a lot of the changes. I actually like the expansion, so I think some of that is getting. I enjoy the 12 team, but it does decrease the importance, as we mentioned. So, but I agree. As people who work in it, I don't mind the paychecks coming in, but some of the changes are getting a little much. But I don't think we can fix it all today. But JD Pickell is on every single day, the On3 YouTube channel, the Hard Count with JD Pickell. Nobody breaks it down like him. Nobody works harder making content than JD Pickell. I'm pumping his tires a little bit here, but I'm excited. I'm excited for all your content during the season as well. That is my favorite, when I'm sitting here writing and I pop on you guys, and I pop on Andy and Ari on the On3 YouTube channel. No one does it like them. So go subscribe right now. Like this video, head to thewolverine.com as well. Use the promo code UM1 for 2 months of access for just $1. JD, thank you so much.
Thanks, Clayton.